So we didn't die. We didn't die. We went into a war with probably the strongest military that the world had probably ever seen, and we didn't die, despite the fact that we had like zero military in comparison. And we didn't die against the British in the War of 1812. In fact, some people even said that we won. It's not really true, which means a lot of people after the War of 1812 are going to start shouting America, flying flags and such, bragging about how the country's the best in the world. So, this idea is called nationalism. And American nationalism in particular began after the War of 1812, regardless of how it turned out. Our national anthem was written then, along with a whole bunch of other patriotic songs. We had new national heroes coming out of the War of 1812, and Andrew Jackson and William Henry Harrison, who both won battles so big that they used that fame from those wins to become president of the United States, both of them. Somebody even decided that we needed an American dictionary. So we spelled words the American way, not the British one. President Monroe he was kind of a smart guy and sort of underrated in terms of those top like founding father guys. Pretty smart guy. And he recognized what he saw. And he saw that we could use this feeling of nationalism to promote a few things. Some really, really big things he wants to accomplish. Like one, he says we can use this to promote and people would go for it, would allow us to have taxes to pay for stuff to improve the country because everyone's like, yo, 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 America. And they'd be good with it because to be pro-government, be pro-America, you're not going to speak against the government. So Mr. Monroe knew that this was going to work out really well, that he could use this sense of false nationalism to really do some of the things thinks needs to be done. For example, the American system. Now, the American system was an idea by a guy named Henry Clay of Kentucky. And what this was, it was an attempt to use American money, federal money in a lot of cases, to build canals like the Erie Canal, roads like the Cumberland Road going through Virginia and Ohio, railroads like the B&O Railroad that you may have seen on the Monopoly board. Now, American money didn't pay for all of that, but American money sort of had some part to play in it, as well as some state money. But some of that money was going to be used to reward inventors for things that significantly improved American lives. Now, again, not a direct payment by President Monroe, but you'll see this feeling of nationalism definitely is going to benefit from and also benefit into this feeling of American nationalism, which is one of the reasons why we see a bunch of new inventions right after the War of 1812 and just before, like Samuel Morse's telegraph, for example, changed everything and also helped to improve nationalism, and it was popularized because of nationalism. John Deere's steel plow. I mean, before John Deere's steel plow, there were wooden plows, and wooden plows were made of, well, wood, and wood breaks when you go up against rock. Just think, steel wins. And you also have Cyrus McCormick's mechanical reaper, which did the work of like several people, which makes you where you can grow more food. And not in a direct way, but in an indirect way, we see those things increase American pride, American nationalism. So it just goes up to a fever pitch from there, partly because of inventors. We also see at the same time period. Now, Monroe didn't have a part to play in those inventions, but he ain't gonna like not benefit either. His popularity, at least. You also have at the same time the first real American novels. You have some of the first real American paintings that are distinctly American in tone and style. Again, increase in nationalism. Some of those false stories about George Washington chopping down a cherry tree, well, those were invented at the same time period. No, it didn't happen. Now, one thing Monroe does do, knowing this is going to be like, yay, America, he's going to come out with this idea called the Monroe Doctrine, which is going to shape American foreign policy for like 2 centuries. And basically, what the Monroe Doctrine is he says this grand statement that all you Western European nations, you better leave these new colonies that are trying to become new nations. You better leave them alone because if you attack them in the Western Hemisphere, we're going to attack you back. We got their back, which is like, what? You're gonna what? The Monroe Doctrine is kind of like this. If you have a younger sibling, I had one. You know that it's sort of like if you want to be mean to that younger sibling, you're like, ha ha ha, that's just little brother, little sister, ha ha. You call him names, maybe take his toys, maybe destroy some of his action figures or whatever. But that's your brother. But then if inside your house, but if someone else outside your house does it, it's on. Well, that's the Monroe Doctrine. Like saying, well, we can, dictate what happens in the Western Hemisphere, but Spain and France and England, you better keep out, or you're going to go to war with us. Not so sure that Mexico is all that cool with it. Anyway, so this is the second generation's follow-up to the first generation. The first generation of Americans would be what you would call founding fathers, except it's really not that simple. This second generation, well, see, we didn't really beat the British, despite what some people said true. We stood our ground, but all of our attempts to take Canada during this war failed. And we tried to get from Great Britain, it failed. And also the majority of the troops on the British side were Canadian. And the British that were fighting here were sort of the second and third string guys because the British, well, they were sort of already busy fighting a more significant war against the French troops under Napoleon. So they weren't sending us like everybody. So the whole thing is sort of diminished even more because we're not really fighting the biggest and best military. And the ones that did come from Great Britain, yeah, they're the ones that were sent here as opposed to actually going to war against someone that's a real threat. They didn't consider us a real threat. And so therefore it was then sort of a false nationalism in America after War of 1812. But did it really matter? Because the common poor American seemed emboldened if they knew about this not loss, because a lot of them couldn't read, that poverty and illiteracy sort of go hand in hand, at least in a time period. Lots of Americans began moving west and away from the cities for their own land because they're now feeling a bit strong and independent, and they know they don't have to worry about the British messing with them anymore. And as they moved west, taking more land, well, you've got to take land from somebody. And so therefore the Native Americans begin to see, after the War of 1812, begin to see their chances to stop American land grabbing. They start to see their chances disappear with the French and British gone from North America, except for Canada. But the more Americans that move out west, being emboldened from this feeling of nationalism, the more land the Native Americans begin to lose. And they sort of see like it's kind of over. In the South, some slaveholders said, well, that War of 1812? Well, our soldiers were wearing cotton uniforms and our ships were flying cotton sails, and the Northeast New England cities are running on textile factories, and the textiles are made from cotton. All of it's cotton. It's all about cotton. And so therefore, if you want to keep America humming, we've got to protect cotton agriculture. We got to protect cotton in the American South. And it's cotton that kept this American engine running. And the way we get that cotton, said the Southern slaveholders, is through slavery. You have to have slavery, they said, to keep America strong. Others said that slavery was absolutely evil. How could you say such a thing? And that this new nationalism should be based not on slavery, but on the idea that all men are created equal. Slaveholders like John C. Calhoun of South Carolina said that yes, slavery is evil, but it's a necessary evil. Like what? Abolitionists, the guys that think that they should get rid of slavery completely, like anyone that has a conscience, like William Lloyd Garrison and the Grimke sisters said, no, it's not a necessary evil, it's just plain evil, which leads to a fight in Missouri and Kansas because you have some pro slave, some anti slave, while some enslaved people themselves are like, no, no, this is not what the Declaration of Independence said. Or, you know what? Maybe I'm just tired of being enslaved. And people like Nat Turner led rebellions, and Harriet Tubman helped them escape. So, again, about that nationalism. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott said, hey, y'all talking about all men are created equal? Women are human too. All men and women are created equal. And they have a conference at Seneca Falls, New York, to establish something called the Declaration of Sentiments, which establishes that, hey, women should have the right in America to own property like men and should have the right to vote like men. Seriously. Now, some people after War of 1812 think that it may be time for an American spin on religion, even. As Baptists and other groups from up north began preaching in the South, they start spreading evangelism and revivalism. Some people even said that, no, all of that, we have new ideas. Some followed Joseph Smith of New York and Brigham Young out west to worship as they pleased, even though they may have felt persecution against their belief system. Well, they move out west, start a new civilization eventually in Salt Lake City, forming the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Some people call them Mormons. They blaze a trail called the Mormon Trail all the way out to Salt Lake City, Utah. Some said that we need to look to nature, not to old European religions. Let's look to America's soul, not in religion, but in nature. We need to go beyond and transcend the what's that are happening and spend time in nature to find the why, to find our true purpose. Some of the leaders of that movement were called Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, and they began to spread their message of transcendentalism, where it's a not really a worship of nature, but where people in general should find their place. Their place is always in relation to the nature that is around them. You have people like Horace Mann coming after the War of 1812, which argued that the only way to keep our country going is if we provide a sound, basic, safe public education for all children, because a child, he says, should not be limited by their parents' choices nor their geography. Some, like Dorothea Dix, said that the mentally ill and prisoners, they're born equal too. So we shouldn't just throw them away. We should try to help them get better and rejoin us because all men and women are created equal. Some fought against alcohol, saying that alcohol is the one thing that's going to keep a man from taking care of his community and his family, and trying to get rid of alcohol or at least knock back public usage of alcohol was called temperance. And all this adds into this idea called the Second Great Awakening. This idea that we have this nearly unlimited ability to make good social, maybe even economic, maybe even political changes. If we're going to have a country, what kind of a country do you want? And you'll find that you have a bunch of different people with a bunch of different opinions. And that's not always based in truth, because you see, all this started from not losing to Canadians. And that is all.